Welcome to another edition of MLS Round-Up from We Are Soccer. I'm your host, Craig Hearn, and as usual, we've got the Soccer Syndicate scout, Brooks Lambier, with us. Brooks, thanks, man, and welcome back.
Thank you, Craig. Happy to be back, and another week of MLS Roundup. So this was an interesting one this past weekend.
Man, such an interesting week here with all the teams playing. Obviously, last week we talked about the games and then the MLS All-Star game. We know what happened to the MLS All-Star game. You know, a nice win there for the MLS All-Stars over Liga MX All-Stars. Some good stuff there. But we're more interested in the games that happened this weekend, as there was a lot of rivalries going on. And then we'll also get into some of the coaching changes that happened. You've got some information on, and then some other fun facts. Why don't we just jump in and start talking about the games, right?
Yeah. Oh, let's go.
All right. So why don't we start off with that Columbus-Cincinnati game? What do they call that rivalry?
Hell is real.
Hell is real.
Yeah.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And that's got some real teeth to it, because those folks in Ohio, they love their rivalries. But this was an interesting game. I mean, I don't even know. I'll let you jump in. Obviously, Columbus won 3-2. What were your thoughts on that Columbus versus Cincinnati game?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the viewers, they should understand is, and if you have relatives in Ohio or you've been to Ohio, I never realized how big of a rivalry there is between Southern and Northern, Ohio. So that makes it very interesting, like we've talked about. But just to jump in, interesting match. A lot of interesting errors amongst back lines and goalkeepers. Columbus with Lucas Zelarayan. And let's mention this just with Zelarayan is what a steal he was for Columbus to get him from Tigres from Liga MX. I mean, he wasn't even playing for Tigres. He was coming off the bench. So what a way for him to kind of re-energize his career. And, he was a little up and down last year, but now he's found his stride. And, if anyone watching the MLS All-Star skills competition on the game, and you could just tell like how happy and energetic he was and his skills and what he brings to the table. But I mean, great free kick goal to start from Columbus.
That free kick, I've got one note written down next to that free kick was just wow. I mean, he couldn't have gotten that thing any more upper 90. You can even see the goalie, the FC Cincinnati goalie. He takes steps over towards. He knows where it's going, and he still can't get to it because it is so upper 90, so top bins that no one is ever going to stop that. What a free kick by Zelarayan.
Yeah, I mean, probably has to be up there for MLS goal of the week. So that's a good one. And I mean, prior to that, he had another one from about the same range, probably about 10 to 15 minutes earlier, that he had just hit 40 yards over the goal. So, if you give Zelarayan a second chance, he's going to probably score, put one on frame. So that was interesting. But then, FC Cincy comes back and Matsuritsa with the great strike off the corner, off a rebound, just striking that far side upper 90 to make it 1-1, to make the rivalry game a little interesting. And then kind of in the second half, everything kind of fell apart a little bit for FC Cincy. Unfortunately, a problem that Kenneth Vermeer had a lot at LAFC was just, he's a shot stopper, but there's times you got to hold on to the ball, man.
You got to hold on. You know what? And as a goalie, they always tell you, if you can't hold on to the ball, push it away, parry that thing away. Don't just block it down and into the striker's feet twice. I mean, he gets in the way, he gets his paw, he gets his body in the way. You're right. He's a shot blocker, but oh man, you can't do that. You just can't push it down to the feet of the striker.
Yep, exactly. And then the player I talked about last week, which for Columbus, who's been a great burst of energy off the bench for, is Miguel Berry, the kid out of University of San Diego, Spanish kid that came over to play college soccer here. And I mean, 2 goals in the last, how many minutes he came on. Obviously the game winning one wasn't beautiful. It was kind of like it was a rebound and it came off him, and but strikers score goals and they don't care how it goes in the back of the net. So he did his job. And honestly, I think Caleb Porter needs to really start thinking about, maybe do I start him over Bradley Wright Phillips, because Phillips has been good, but he hasn't given you that production and that spark that Miguel Berry has given that team. And with all the injuries they've gone through, you know, it'll be interesting to see how Caleb Porter uses Bradley Wright Phillips and Miguel Berry going forward.
That's a very interesting point. I do want to hit upon something you said. It wasn't the prettiest goal, but it all counts the same, right? It counts the same as a bicycle kick or a upper 90. They all count the same.
Yes.
And twice he's in the right place at the right time, and that's half of being a striker. It's just being in the right place at the right time. So yeah, and that ended a little bit of an a winless streak for Columbus. They were flying high, and then all of a sudden they had some injuries and some bad luck, and went through some games where they just couldn't pull it out, couldn't win, and this kind of pulled it back. And what a game to do it in a rivalry versus their in-state rival Cincinnati there.
Yes, yeah, get some momentum going in the next week, which would be good. So yeah, that's a rivalry game though, right? You're going to come down in the last minute.
Another in-state rivalry we should talk about is that Orlando versus Inter Miami game. This kind of had a little bit of a different feel. Not so many goals, but some very good goalkeeping. What are your thoughts on that Orlando Miami game?
Yeah, that was a very interesting one. I mean, the best chance was early off the handball inside the box. And then Tesha Wakandele stepping up for Orlando and just not really giving it his best effort, or not really putting a lot into that one. But, great save by Marsman, who's come on of late to start in goal for them. Because I think like Inter Miami's has had a lot of inconsistency from their goalkeepers.
Yeah.
But I mean, Marsman and Galice, Galice, good with his feet. I mean, MLS All-Star. I mean, if you've watched last year with Orlando, a big reason why they're so successful and why they're sitting in second place in the Eastern Conference is because of Galice. And obviously you have Nani and a lot of the other guys, and Oscar Pereira. And listen, you can't deny what Oscar Pereira has done for Orlando City. Right. He has really turned that franchise around, and he's, and the great thing about Oscar is, if you're international, if you're a college player, if you're an American, a veteran MLS player, I mean, he'll find a spot for you and he'll figure out what you bring to the table, and he will really, use your skills and your value in that system he plays to make you a successful player and help Orlando become a successful team. So.
Yeah, I mean, I like both those squads down there. Orlando, they've got a real nice squad the way they're playing. And Inter Miami, they've just been through some trials and tribulations this season. They went through a winless streak there, but I think they're pulling it out, and they've really got some. I don't know. Their team's a unique team. As I said, probably the team that I'm trying to follow the most, because I do like the way they play, like some of their players. But there's a good point for both teams. Kind of all you can say about that. Just some good defense and some good goalkeeping, which is unlike a lot of the other games in the MLS past weekend. With that, do you want to talk about any more in that game, or do you want to move on to the next one?
I don't think there's too much really in that game. I mean, it was what it was, but I mean, there was some good football played. Unfortunately, no one could find the back of the net.
Yep, exactly. Well, from there, why don't we move on to the Austin v. Dallas, another in-state rivalry game. And this one had a consistent theme for me, which was just don't, like, oh my word, what are we doing here? As we talked about, some mistakes, some defender get caught out. Man marking wasn't quite where it should be. What are your thoughts on that, Austin versus Dallas? I should say that Dallas, FC Dallas won 5-3 over Austin FC. And it was in the new Q2 stadium in Austin. And Dallas kind of ran riot there for a while, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Hey, listen, if you liked goals, that was the game to watch. There were 8 of them. So, I mean, if you like people scoring, no matter how the goals were scored, if they were off terrible back passes from the back when Austin was trying to build out, or like you said, not good man marking, or guys getting caught out and so guys can get slipped in behind. Yep. I mean, listen, goals were scored. It was entertaining. Austin FC, Q2 Stadium. Let's not deny it. It's got a great atmosphere to it. When Austin FC scores a goal, it goes dark and there's just green everywhere. So, it's an entertaining venue. So, but listen, hey, let's point out Ricardo Pepi and and Jesus Ferreira. I mean, the 20 and 18-year-old scoring 4 of the 5 goals. And Pepe now heading into the national team, which should be interesting. Some good momentum. Would like to see him more involved at times in the game. Jesus Ferreira, playing with the Olympic team this past summer, doing all right, but it's good to see the young guys for Dallas playing. If you really think about it, that back four for Dallas, they were all college drafted guys. So you had Hollingsworth, Matt Hedges played at Butler, Hollingsworth played at UCLA. You have Nkosi Burgess, so they call him Tafari now, who was a kid at University of Seattle, transferred from UConn. And then at the right back spot, you had Ima Tumasi, who was a high draft pick from Wake Forest University. So, and again, this is the uniqueness of Dallas, is that they were going to play their young players, their young academy players with college guys, plus some internationals. And then, if we look at Austin FC, we can talk about the mistakes all day, building on the back too much, I think. At what point do you stop trying to play pretty and just try to get out, so then you can get into the opponent's final third and score? They put up 3, but unfortunately it was too late by the time, they got, 2 and 3. So
do you feel with Dallas kind of going with that? There seems to be a theme through our show here today of college players, right? And kind of graduating from college into the MLS and playing. Do you feel that Dallas playing some of those younger college, or some of those college players with some of the international, some of the more experienced players, do you feel that they're not doing too well right now? They've won 6 out of 22 games this year, but do you think in the next year or 2 or 3 that is really going to benefit them? Or are they just the kind of team or club that it's just what they're going to do for this year and see where it goes and see what happens, and there's no real plan? Because if I was building a team, I would like a good core of international players, a good core of senior American MLS type players, and a good core of younger players, and you mix those together because you try to build for the future. Is that what they're trying to do, or are they just kind of throwing it out there and seeing what happens?
I think Dallas is an interesting team because you have a top-rated academy, and during that game on Fox, a lot of the stuff pregame and intermission, they talked about all the FC Dallas players, Justin Chi, Chris Richards, training at Bayern. Chris is at Bayern right now. Justin Chi may be sold over there. You have Tanner Tessman, who's at Venezia. You have Reggie Cannon, who came through that, who's now playing in Portugal. You have Brian Reynolds, who's at Roma, who came through the FC Dallas Academy. So FC Dallas is being a top academy, and Philly getting onto that level as well, is you have some interesting dynamics with that, because you want to play those players, and you obviously want to sell some of them to help with the academy and other financial things. But I think Dallas will always be a team that's going to play their young academy players. And in the past, it's been a team that honestly has cared about the draft. They have been one of the few teams that have said, hey, like, this guy's interesting. Let's play him with North Texas, our USL League One team, and see what he, if he can make the jump from, League One then to MLS with our first team. So I think the one area Dallas has really struggled with for a while has been finding that international DP that has really put them over the line. Because I think one of their big DP signings doesn't even start for them. It's their academy guys and some of their other lower international guys they've paid for. So Dallas is interesting when it comes to building their team. And if you look at MLS, every team really builds their team differently in certain ways, depending on how much money they're willing to spend, the academy system they have, the scouting staffs they have, how much their coaches know about American soccer and international market and everything. So I think it's a trend you'll see that you talked about that Dallas will continue. It's, can they hit that sweet spot with that DP in the certain situations that you're going to buy the international player for? So, usually at the number 10, the international money, international players are going to be bought for that, or the center forward or a winger position. I mean, you're not going out and spending a huge amount of money on international to center back or outside back. It's going to be those positions where they can score you goals and help you produce offensively.
It'd be interesting to see how they do develop throughout the year, and if they can next year make a little bit of a run. And as you talked about, Ricardo Pepi has now pledged his allegiance to the USA national team. He had the choice I don't know if a lot of the viewers know this, but he had the choice of either playing for Mexico or the USA, and he has vowed to play for the USA, and he's now in the 26-man squad for the World Cup qualifiers coming up in the next week and a half here. It'd be nice to see him get some minutes, and kind of that cap ties him to the USA,
Yes.
as I think he's going to be a player, that'll come good in the next couple of years.
He's a special player. So just one quick story before we move on our next match is
Do it.
I think he came back from U17 US World Cup qualifiers. And this was when he was playing for North Texas. He had to be 16 or 17. I think he was 16 at the time. And they were playing Lansing Ignite that night. And I went to go watch that game because I wanted to watch to see what the USL League One level was like. He had flown from Florida that day into Michigan and had met the team there, and he didn't come on until the second half. And it's the goal. If you look up the North Texas, it's a goal you can find on YouTube. He had a free kick from probably about 30 yards out, and you had a great view from Lansing in the Lansing Lugnut Stadium in the center field where I was standing, where I was taking notes. That you were like, he's going to strike this thing, and he's going to strike it, and it's going to go on target. And sure as hell, he struck that thing, curled it in upper 90 past Stephen Cleveland. And I'm like, this kid's legit. Like the talk is real about this kid to come off the plane to do this. And I mean, listen, was it a great performance? No, but the kid can score goals. And that's what we're looking for right now for the men's national team. Who's going to step up and score goals? So
yeah, that's something the USA right now, the men's national team is struggling with. Who's that true number 9? Who is that player? We could go all day, Josh Zardes, Daryl DK. Is it going to be Hoppe? Is it going to be Reyna? Who is it? So yeah, maybe in the next couple of years it'll be Pepe who steps up in there, right?
Possibly.
And one of the other games, probably a game you spent a lot of time watching and analyze, is that Seattle versus Portland, another rivalry game. What are your thoughts on that game? As we know, kind of probably didn't end the way most people did. Most people thought Seattle was going to walk away with it, but the Timbers came away 2-0 winners. What are your thoughts on that game, my friend?
Yeah, that was talk about very un-Seattle like in Seattle. One, it's hard to win in Seattle. 2, the streak that Seattle had been on, and how, the past couple of years they've started off the season so poorly, and then finally they hit a hot streak, and then they ride that out to the end of the season into the playoffs. And the last 2 years, Seattle has started off pretty well. But that first half, and if anyone watched the game and they saw the interview at halftime with Ryan Schmetzer, he's like, that's not our team. They're doing too much. They're chasing the game. We're not possessing the ball enough. It was so un-Seattle-like, but it was important for Portland at that time because a couple of weeks ago they had lost 5-2 or 6-2 to Seattle at home in Providence Park. It was important that Portland came out and took it to Seattle, which they did in that first half. A little bit of if anyone watched the game, Eric Williamson going down, cutting and stopping, and nothing has come out yet, but it looked like he did his ACL, which I feel awful for the kid. He's a kid I scouted at the University of Maryland, and I remember telling that kid, he played at Michigan State, Maryland, and I went down and I wanted, I knew at the time he didn't want to stay at DC United. And I just said, I came up to the kid, I was like, listen, like wherever you go, man, I know you're going to be a special player, and I look forward to watching you at the next level. And, we bought his homegrown rights, and he's been with Portland. It's been quite a story for him. I mean, he didn't start at Portland when he first came. He had to play with T2. He went over to Portugal on a loan and came back and had to work his way in. And it was just devastating to see him being taken off on a stretcher and, looking like he's done his ACL. So, from that standpoint, that really hurt the Timbers, but it was a good response in the second half from them.
Yeah, it was a non-contact injury, just so everybody's aware, right? He was
Yes.
into turn. Yeah. Those are, as we've said, everybody knows those are the worst injuries. You can, if you get a contact injury, you're just hoping it's a kick or a twist or something, but non-contact's the worst. So yeah, hopefully he's able to bounce back.
Yeah.
With that game, do you think that Portland came out with a different game plan, or do you think Seattle just thought it was going to be another easy 5-2, 6-2 victory? Did you think was it just down to Portland coming out with a different game plan and really going at it and really.
Yeah. I mean, I think the uniqueness of what Seattle has switched to with this 3-5-2 and the players they have, I think, they kind of talked about on the broadcast is I think teams are figuring out ways to defend that and to come out and what you need to do. And I think partially it was just, Portland having a plan, but I think knowing that the way the last two games went, I think, the coaching staff and a lot of the players knew that they needed to win this game to get some momentum, which the win then drove them, now they're in the playoffs, they're in that sixth spot just above RSL. They're tied both at 27 points. But I think that was the big momentum factor for them, was that they knew they needed to come out and give a good performance because they knew the last two games they played was not their best performance. So I think that was part of it. I mean, listen, you need luck sometimes. Seattle at the post a lot in the second half, probably at least 5 or 6 times. But Steve Clark, the Mason, Michigan native, and went to alum of Oakland University, made some huge saves.
Yep.
And you need that from a goalkeeper from time to time. And then your post can be your very best friend at times. And you put the game away with some errors from stuff in Cleveland and some bad back passes from Seattle, and you come out there with the 2-0 win.
Do you expect this to propel Portland on now? Do you expect them to move forward using this as a springboard?
I think so, because one, beating your rivals always gives you a little momentum into the next game, which they're going to play Vancouver. So that's the Cascadia rivalry between the three of them. So Portland probably doesn't want to lose to Vancouver, one of their bitter rivals in the Northwest. Two, if you look at Portland, I don't think they're losing anyone to any World Cup qualifiers. I think they're going to have most of their guys. Now they have to regroup, obviously, with Eric Williamson, and possibly him being out for the rest of the season. But I think Gio will figure it out, and hopefully that momentum can carry them to getting results now, because it's the end of we're heading towards the end of the season. And that's where, if you don't get results, you get stuck, losing a few in the row and not winning games you should at home. That's where, the difference is going to be made, and teams will catch you from behind.
Absolutely. And Portland need to keep going, because right now they're 7th. They're literally 1 point into the playoff spot. If they drop any games, the teams behind them, the Real Salt Lake and Vancouver Whitecaps are going to catch them, and also San Jose Earthquakes. It's really tight in there. So if one of those teams goes on a run and another team fails and loses a couple games, there's going to be some shifting happening. Like we spoke about last week, it's really congested in that middle of the West.
Yep.
So why don't we shift gears and talk about some of the coaching changes that happened this past week? Some big news coming out. What do you got? What are you hearing, and what happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, the two biggest coaches that parted ways, whether anyone wants to interpret that as, they were fired or they mutually agreed to part ways, interpret that how you want. But, I think the Mark Dos Santos parting ways at Vancouver and his brother Philip, heading along with him as a top assistant, I think that was bound to happen. It just didn't have a last few good years at Vancouver. You can't go into the Canadian Cup and lose to a CPL team 4-3 with the CPL team not having their best player.
Right. That's not going to do you any favors as a manager. I'm sorry, losing to a lower division team when you're already struggling. Not going to do you any favors there.
Exactly. And I mean, they could just tell at Vancouver, there was just some, I don't want to say culture issue, but you could just tell there was something off, when you watch them play, and you can tell by the players' body language. The more you watch the teams play and such, you can very much tell when they show up and when they don't. And, listen, Vancouver has the time now to, they have an interim coach that just stepped in, one of the assistants, and, they have a chance to take that new momentum they have and to use that to get them into the playoffs. As we said, they're not very far off that playoff line. Surprisingly, which they just beat the other guy that was just parted ways from the other MLS team was RSL's head coach, Freddie Juarez. We know what Freddie had worked his way up from the academy into Monarchs and then to the first team. So, that was an interesting
Yeah, tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that, because he left of his own accord and went.
Yes.
He left a head coaching position and is
Yes.
now an assistant. What happened there? What's going on?
Yeah, so it's not been confirmed that he's joining the Seattle staff yet.
Okay.
It's been talked about, it's been the rumor. So RSL is in a very interesting situation. As we know with the Delay Hansen stuff last year and everything that went on, that he sold the team. MLS now operates and runs RSL
Mm-hmm.
until they can find a new owner. So anything that within the club they do, they have to get league approval, and the league approves of what the moves and money they can use to make those moves. But what it sounded like from that quote from Elliot Fall, one, I think the assistant GM, is that it sounds like they just wanted a bigger name in there. They want someone, whenever they have someone that's going to buy the club, to kind of spark some momentum into the club. RSL is an interesting one, very much like FC Dallas, where they play a lot of their academy guys because their academy is one of the stronger ones in MLS. They've figured out, Krylak and Rusnak, are top guys they've brought in. They brought in Bobby Wood and some other international guys. Well, Bobby Wood being American, but they brought in some international guys that made a difference. I just, it sounded like it was kind of a move that Freddie wanted to move on, but it sounds like the front office wants a little more from someone. So it was interesting. But if you look at when they brought Pablo Mastroeni in, it was a very late addition to the coaching staff, and you're kind of like, that's interesting. That came on very late. He was just added. Was there something to it that he was going to take over as interim head coach, and does he get the job? And and unfortunately, they go into Vancouver this past weekend, and Vancouver smacks them, I think 5-1 or 5-2. So that it's an interesting one, but I mean, that's just how it's how it works in MLS and coaching jobs throughout the the world.
Yeah, it does work a little differently here in the MLS compared to a
Yeah.
lot of the other leagues in the world.
Yeah.
And then you've got some interesting general manager news. What's going on there? What team, and what are you hearing?
Yeah. So Houston today just parted ways, or fired their GM, Matt Jordan. So and I think Houston over the past couple of years has been a club that's, I think, has underperformed.
Yeah.
With I mean, Houston used to be one of the top teams that would always make the playoffs.
Yep.
Back 5, 6, years ago. You bring a coach like Tab Ramos, who has done well with the USU 20s, knows the game, MLS, knows the American platform, is big on development. It sounds like there just needs to be a change with that one, because it sounds like Matt Jordan just wasn't getting it done. So it'll be interesting to see who steps in there. About a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, FC Cincinnati fired their GM. So we'll see what they do. It's interesting with FC Cincinnati. They've done everything well off the field, but unfortunately on the pitch, they just can't figure it out. So there's some reshuffling there. And then the most recent one, Jesse Forinelli left San Jose, parted ways. He left on his own, and Chris Leach has kind of taken over, one of the guys inside the front office. But we have some other guys, some candidates were reported by Jeff Carlisle. So we have Craig Weibel, who's at Seattle right now, Stuart Mears, DC United, Chris Albright from Philly, Will Kuntz from LAFC, and then Chris Leach is in one of those 5 candidates for that GM job. So
what is that an appealing job? Which do you feel is the more appealing jobs out of all the general manager positions that are open? Which one would you prefer to sit in if you could have a
San Jose, because they've brought guys like Cade Cowell and some other guys through their academy system. It's a very nice area. There's a lot of kids in California. Like, there's a lot of spots where teams don't get into, where there's no territories. So it's an interesting one. Unfortunately, San Jose doesn't have the academy setup structure with, if kids come out of state or from different parts of California. They don't have like dorms or whatnot like RSL does. So, do you bring in a guy like Chris Albright from Philly who could probably help you with the academy system? But and get some international guys in there. I think this GM job is going to be interesting. You have a guy like Craig Weibel, who was an assistant coach at University of Michigan. He's a Northwest guy. He's from Washington, Seattle, I believe. Played at San Jose, as a player in MLS. So you'd probably think that Craig probably has the front runner for the job because he knows the organization, he knows the area. But it's going to be interesting to see that new GM that steps in, how they're going to, change things and what direction they're going to go in. Because I think Matias Almeida at San Jose is a very good coach. He's very passionate and he wants to do well. It's just, are San Jose going to fork out the money to get the players they want and to put the club in the direction that it needs to go to?
Well, do you feel that when they bring that GM in, is it going to be soon, and will they make a change? Because they are 1 point, 2 points right now out of playoff spots. So do you feel that they're going to try and make that decision soon in order to get the team going in the right direction and get into the playoffs? Or maybe they're not too worried about that, the immediate future, and they're more looking long-term? What are your thoughts there?
I think the reports have said that they want to get someone in within the next few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see when that new GM comes in, if it's an immediate impact, like an effect with certain things. I mean, obviously the transfer window is going to close, so you can't make moves and such, but you can start preparing for the next season, which I think a lot of people don't understand is when you're a front office guy, if you're thinking with that just season you're starting, you're not doing your job right. You got to think 2-3 years down the road of what it's going to look like, what players you're going to have, what's your academy system going to look like. If you don't think down the road in these front office jobs with these soccer organizations, you're going to fall behind and you're not going to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Well, as we just talked about, a lot of coaching changes, a lot of general manager changes happening with the MLS, just coming out of we're just now entering the halfway part of the season. So still half the season to go, have a lot of games to be played. So a lot of different things can happen. Lots to come. Lots to come. It's an exciting league. As we talked about, some dumb mistakes are getting made from defenders and goalkeepers, but we've also said there's a lot of growth, the room for growth, and now the younger players are going to be able to step in because some of these players are disappearing for the next couple of weeks for World Cup qualifiers. MLS, unlike a lot of the leagues in the world, does not go on a hiatus. They don't miss a week. They just keep going. They plow ahead with games. So the young kids are going to get plugged in and they're going to get some serious playing time, which is going to part of the MLS and what makes it so appealing, right?
Yeah. Hashtag play your kids. So let's see what happens. These Seattle does and FC Dallas and Philly and even some of these younger college guys that are on these rosters that, will get some shots to play. So it's a good chance to make an impact and impression on the head coach. So, we'll see what happens. And this is the time when teams that don't have a lot of people going on international duty to make an impact, to make a little bit of jump, to catch up, get 3-6 points here and see if they can make moves up the table and the standings. So it should be interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, this time next week, we could be talking and things could have shifted because of games of, the 3 to 6 points that have moved around within them. So, well, I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. Brooks, thanks again for joining. You are our MLS expert, our resident expert. So I appreciate you spending the time with us and kind of letting us know what's going on in the league.
Thank you, Craig. I appreciate it. And looking forward to next week.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, folks, same time next week. And we'll do another MLS Roundup with Brooks. Thanks. And we'll see you all later.